Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session with us on Aucademy. I'm Dr. Chloe Farahar. I'm in the lower right of the screen. My left and rights are not that great when I'm looking at a screen anymore.
That way.
And it's confusing because Zoom does it
it's
the
reversely.
other way. And I'm a white person with a shaved head, giant glasses, and one of my giant hoods by a huge hood company. It's so huge. I just love it, and it's got a dinosaur on the front, which makes me very happy. And I'm joined today. Well, our guest is Sam Harris over here. Sam, the beach directionist.
Beach is that way. No, both ways. It's all the ways. I didn't choose that name, by the way. Mine was worse, actually.
So we've got Sam, who is our guest, and then we've got our hosts for today. I'm kind of here, but we've got Tigger, who is up. I'm really not good at finding out where they are on the screen. Tigger is up in the corner, and then we've got Ben, who is on the screen as a potato. So I'm just going to ask people to do physical descriptions for themselves. So if I start with Tigger, if you're comfortable to do a physical description.
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm completely confused by left and right, especially in the mirror on this and everything. I'm done for. Zoom, I'm so used to. Hi, Tigger, mid to late 50s, white male, I know. Shaven head, wearing a purple jumper and an awesome favourite blue shirt, which I think I've got 20 now, Marks and Spencer's jumpers of different colours, and this is my 12th next shirt medium. Sorry, just me. And awesomely happy to be here. And then we've got
Ben.
So I'm Ben, a white young man using a video filter for potato with gaming headphones, and I'm in front of a bright purple brick wall.
We love the potato so much. The potato makes us so happy. And our guest, Sam.
Well, I'm the odd one out in sort of head shape wise, because we're pretty round there. Not they're not all potato. Not that you've all got heads like potatoes. That's not what I meant. It's all round. I am. What am I? Big sort of hairy white man. Middle age. If I live to 80, but then I guess it's all dependent, isn't it? It's all relative. I've got quite a hairy face, quite a lumpy face. Quite a wrinkly face, really. Sort of eyes disappear when you smile. Quite tidy little do at the front. But what I've done is I've kept it. There's a party in the back, right there.
I'm really worried about that bit. What is that bit, Sam?
So it's basically I'm getting back to my ancestral roots, Chloe. But it turns out my ancestors are hillbillies. So I'm actually a direct descendant of the great chieftain Billy Ray Cyrus.
Okay.
You might have seen some of my family members on Making a Murderer, but there you go. No, basically, I went in. I tried to get like a braid, like a Viking braid, which looked all Viking-y, cool. But then, of course, when I got home, it fell out, and no one told me that. So when it fell out, I looked in the mirror. I was like, "I've got a mullet." I didn't. What? How did that happen? So,
Can't your wife can plait it, make it into a braid?
Yeah, she can, but she thinks that's ridiculous. So she tells me off. Says you got yourself into this mess, Sam. Get yourself out of
This
it.
is true. You have got yourself into this mess.
it's nice to have so much on hair. It's nice to have so much on hair.
Changed my mind about 3 times on the way to the appointment. The poor hairdresser lady had to cut it bit by bit so that I could make my mind up as we went. And by the end, I think she just wanted me out. So there you go.
I won't class them as nightmares. If and when I'm his wife, I'll cut it, says Si. So, well, I've lost my train of thought. Oh, no. Sometimes I have bad dreams that I can't get my hair cut, and it's like really long, and I can't find a razor. They're all blunt. So that's like my nightmare is hair growth.
You get real sensory sort of challenges from long hair.
So my dreams are just like, yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that back.
Sam,
anyway,
if I may, one day you'll have a visual memory. I did this for so many years. You'll do that, and one day it'll just be gone. Because that's what I remember. I had long hair for once. Yeah, I remember doing that for a good couple of years after I cut it.
I think you should do that anyway. Just do that.
Just kind of do.
Quite a sort of good power move.
Massage.
This might be quite random given the topic as well. So I did say in this session, Sam Harris meanderingly discusses ADHD discovery journey. which I thought is probably going to be quite meandering.
Just
So
we've
because
met.
well, this is true. We have, yes. And actually, yes, we do know each other from doing other bits and pieces. But this is the first time that I've allowed you to be a guest on Aucademy itself, because you are now disclosing that you are neurodivergent. And
that makes it sound, Chloe, that makes it sound like I've been trying to sneak in. Like I've finally allowed you in. You keep. Come on,
well, before, when you were still umming and ahhing about whether you were neurotypical, although all of us were like, you are not neurotypical, Aucademy we do not allow neurotypicals on as guests or hosts.
Wow.
So now you can come on because you feel, hopefully, we can talk about this, but how comfortable, confident, whatever it is that you might feel, because all feelings, when you discover your neurodivergence, are valid, and they're not always positive as well. I think is quite important to remember, not necessarily just for you, Sam, but just in general. We've been talking a lot about some of the common reactions when people discover they're neurodivergent. Sigh, no.
Why am I only seeing that? I've not seen one comment. I've not had it on. I can't see any comments on this. You
can't see any comments because we've got nice comments. We've got Janice saying nice to see Tigger, that they miss coffee time.
Oh yeah, my organisational skills are terrible, but thank you.
Yeah,
I'll be back.
So you got not nice to see Tigger, and then Simon saying I'm going to bang his back doors in or something like me.
Yes, because
nice
I forget.
Tigger.
I would like sometimes young people to be able to watch Aucademy videos, and that they be
go on, we'll do it.
PG.
No, don't go on.
It's very Sam.
It feels like a boys' club right now, and then there's me down here in the corner. No, I'm joking. It's fine. So I'm going to hand over to Tigger because they've got our first question. And Tigger's like, "Oh no, I'm on mute." Tigger, you're on mute.
God, I just muted it to cough. Sorry, and then forgot to unmute. Welcome everybody. How you doing? It is good to virtually see you all. And yes, my organisational skills are rubbish. I wonder why. I know Sam, and as I said in the preamble, Sam and I have actually. Should I say touch? No, we've had coffee.
You touched
met.
me as an
we've
entity.
Sat down. I know. I said, I said Sam and I had actually touched as entities, and then realised what I'd said.
I don't know what my entity is, so it sounds inappropriate.
It's a physical, corporal being. I don't know, but it's, and we've worked together, and we've known each other. And I will say, since the first time we met, the reason why we worked together, the reason why we got on so well, was because there was that connection. I think very strongly. We had a bit of discussion about that. We're going to explore that maybe further this evening. But so I'm going to go straight in with the first question. So this is your chance, Sam. To tell us who you are. What are your dedicated interests? What are your special interests, whichever term you prefer to use? Who are you? What are your passions?
I mean, given it took me sort of 3.5 minutes to talk about my haircut, I think we could.
I know.
How long you got? So
I've got a timer. You're okay.
As of now, I mean, prehistory.
You missed the first bit.
Who am I? Sam.
Who
Did we
are
not
you?
do that? I'm Sam. I've been working to support neurodivergent children and young people and their families since about 2007 in various different roles. And then since about 2013, I've been working more directly with families and parents. And I previously set up an organisation named BizNet in Exeter, which if you're local to the area, you may or may not have heard of it. Didn't set up the organisation, set up the project through the organisation CEDA, and then have moved recently to running Dear, where I run the family services, and I also run Neurodive, which is sort of a Facebook page that's me. But then I'd say, I do that weird thing on Neurodive where I say, here at Neurodive, we like to blah, blah, blah. It's just me calling myself we. It doesn't make any sense at all. Look at that.
Yay.
Seeing the comments. Yeah, that's all my info and stuff there. So you can go and find out for yourself. The beach directionist is not how I refer to myself. Again, that's Simon, who I think lives over there somewhere. I recently had a sort of official, unofficial journey of discovery around ADHD. It was something that had been pointed out to me for a long time. Made a lot of sense in the work that I'd done, but I'd never really explored it that deeply. I'm going to go off on loads of tangents. So I'm supposed to be saying on who I am. I think I've done that, maybe. And it's interests loads. Prehistory has been around for a while. I looked like a caveman until about 3 weeks, and then now I just look like a hillbilly. So, hillbilly caveman. What other special interests? Sport, exercise. Jiu-jitsu I was obsessed with for a while. I have lots of things that I've sort of done for like 6 months, a year, 2 years, really intensively, and then haven't ever done them again. Bit like you, Tigger, I've had more podcasts than Spotify. Started about 3 of them, got about halfway in.
Yeah, that's our similarities, certainly.
Yeah, there's definitely some similarities there. Specializations, like I say, I mean, I kind of learned on the job. I started working with children, neurodivergent children and young people long time ago, and not really, if I'm honest, not really on purpose. Kind of fell into some summer work enabling, but just loved it. Just something about it, something about connecting with people that perhaps other people were finding it hard to connect with. I always found it really interesting, which sounds awful really when I say it out loud, because it feels like it's like an experiment or something. It wasn't. I always had a lot of empathy and connection with the kids I was working with, but I found it really interesting to try and figure out the best way to keep them happy, healthy, safe, and for me, and this is where the ADHD thing later on makes a lot of sense, it's like my brain doesn't work if I'm not interested. It's like it just doesn't do stuff. It's just, and the trouble is, it's not even all the time in one area. So like, I can be really interested in, say, organizing a webinar, or, coming on a lot, and be really on it and send like 10 emails planning it. And then the last bit where you have to put it in place, I go off somewhere else and I'm not thinking about it again for 6 weeks. So the fact that I was interested in my job, I think, is why I'm still here now doing it. I think one of the worries I had when I started talking about perhaps having ADHD was that families that were then coming to meetings where a lot of the time I'll spend an hour listening to someone, believe it or not, having not stopped talking now, probably for 5 minutes solid, who knows. But when I'm listening, it's like a process. I'm really trying to hear what they're saying. I'm really trying to make myself be in that moment. And again, because I find it interesting trying to help, it's never been a problem. Whereas if it was a classroom and they were talking about Oxbow Lakes, different story. I'd be making something up, doing something else, throwing something across the room. Jumper swearing. Have I told you about jumper swearing? I won't do it, but yeah, you just shout really loudly swear words into a jumper. It's
interesting, is I can't remember when we first met, and we've been, you've invited me to some of your stuff, which is really cool, and we worked together. There was always that understanding. I've got this saying about where you could see that you could smell. That's my term, isn't it? You could smell what children needed. There's that, what I'm like. You kind of had that focus. You kind of had that insight. I sometimes sit there and go, that's it, I've got it. Do you know what I mean? And I've seen you do that. I've seen you in the way we work together, where families have put questions towards you and stuff. And I've seen the way you've grown through that and got the answer and stuff. So, and like I said, early on, we did click. And I just thought, I can understand why we would click. And I'm really interested in exploring where you are now. And if I'm honest, comparing it to where I am now a bit as well. But really, that's my, and I have our first question over and done with. I should hand over now.
So question next is, when did you discover you experienced ADHD?
Wow. I mean, it's a big question anyway, but to be asked that question simultaneously being asked the first question in your life by a floating potato with gaming headphones on is quite something to take in there. But excellent question though. When did I discover you? It depends what you mean by discover, doesn't it? Really, because if it's the first time I went, that sounds familiar, then it was probably right at the start when I started. So when I started work as an enabler, because I loved it so much, because I just wanted to get better and understand, I just read everything. I'd be reading books on holiday. I'd have, I didn't have any sort of educational background in that area, so I was just trying to get it in. And I remember reading, I think there's a book called A Challenging Journey, which is a mum's account of taking her three boys away on some adventure weekend on her own, and I think 2 of them had ADHD, and possibly the other was on the waiting list or something. There's a lot of ADHD, and there was a lot of it in there where I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty familiar. Then at work, when I moved into management, that's the first time other people started saying it. And then I would probably say when I started working more, I guess more online. I think, to be honest, working with you, Chloe, early on, with you, Tigger, early on, that was the first time I was kind of like, I might actually have to really, really think about this, because you were so insistent. a lot of the people I was talking to, it wasn't just, have you ever thought about it? It's like, you are. And then I think, Chloe, you told me someone saw me as like a floating orange triangle or something, which means you are.
Oh, okay. So that means that our Jessica with their synesthesia at some point has, yes, if you were you more of a colour than a shape? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I remember thinking,
I can't remember either, but usually ADHD is, and we're going to get around to talking about the language as well, but ADHD is for Jessica are kind of either yellow or yellowy orange. Sometimes they don't have a shape as well. They're just the colour. But that definitely means they're not neurotypical. But yeah, the ADHD colour tends to be yellow or orange, I think, which is really interesting because they don't know you. They've only ever seen,
I think.
Yeah, seen videos of you online.
So I guess discovery is an interesting one, Ben. I would say, like, it depends what you mean, because actually I wouldn't even say now what's happened recently. So more recently, Harry Thompson did a live pre-screening with me, and then I got my colleague, who's Dr. Sylvia Hayward-Panella, which you can see on the Neurodive Facebook page. She did like a full assessment using all the diagnostics, but she's not officially trained in that capacity, so it's not an official diagnosis. And plus, I didn't pay for it. I don't know if you have to pay for it to be official. World we live in, it wouldn't surprise me. But it wasn't. She did all the sort of proper officially diagnosis stuff, and she said it was very conclusive, which for her is. I wasn't expecting that, so I would say discovery could be used at any of those points potentially, but even now, what's happened really, and it's interesting what you asked, Tigger, about my experience of it, and what you said, Chloe, about everyone's feelings valid. I don't feel that different, and that sometimes makes me feel bad, actually, because I hear so many things and work with so many people that struggle, and I'm just here like, tra-la-la, might be, yeah, all right, crack on. So it's a bizarre thing to.
There might be a number of things there, though. There might be that there's potentially less prejudice towards ADHD to internalise. Yeah. There's a lot of prejudice to internalise, sadly, when we work out we're autistic. There might be a number of things because, as well, you've worked so long with neurodivergent people and seeing them and understanding them as whole human beings. So I think it's fair to say that you don't approach in... How long did you say you've been working with neurodivergent people?
Officially as in knowing it, 2007, I would have said.
sometime.
Yeah,
I don't know, my maths is terrible. Don't tell.
Decade and a half, 15 years, I guess.
Yes, so a long time. And I think it's fair to say that you don't approach those individuals as if they are broken and things like that. So maybe that's had a protective property for you as well, because you've not necessarily had to internalize that quite negative perspective.
Really good point. And actually, that was my mum. So I got the job at Cedar by. So I went to uni. We won't go into detail. You said you wanted the kids to be able to watch it, so we won't talk about uni. I came back after 5 years with a lot of debt and the most ironic certificate of attendance you'll ever get, because I went to about 6 lectures in 5 years, didn't get past the second year, and they sent you a certificate of attendance afterwards because they couldn't give you a degree. She didn't do anything. And I came back to Cedar, and my mum went, "You're getting a job. You're working here." Because I'm the charity fundraiser for the organisation, so they have to take you. so I did. But she'd always worked in the charity sector, more with profound and physical disabilities initially. And then because of that, I remember her attitude was always, it's, the social model of disability, and, it's society that disables. They're people. Everybody's people. They're just people with differences. And I hope she doesn't watch this and feel bad that I said it, but I do remember her at one point, my most vivid memory of this, which was brilliant in a way, although it doesn't sound that nice, but she was talking about someone, and me being a sort of naive 7-8-year-old, I was like, "Mum," I think she said, "Oh, so-and-so's a bit of a bitch." And I went, "Mum, she's in a wheelchair." And Mum just went, "Yeah, wheelchair users can be bitches too, Sam." And okay, fair enough, because people, people different, but people are people. So I guess that was like in there somewhere. And then when I finally fell into the work, it was just, kids is kids, but different kids, and actually more interesting anyway, because they're different, because of the differences and diversity. I say all the time, the difference and diversity to me is what makes us human. That's the bit that sets us apart from every other species, is that sort of level of neurodiversity. But there you go.
It's interesting because I'm slightly older than you, just slightly older than you. I think my first, I think 1987, if you were born then.
Yeah, it was 4.
Hurt me deep, right? Yeah.
Probably had the same haircut 20. Though, to be fair.
Right, oh god, 3, right? Yeah, I think I was 20 something, 22. But it's interesting as that journey, because for me, there's no difference as such. They were just awesome individuals that I worked with and for, and that was the journey I've been on. And I felt part. I felt I belonged. I felt safe, and I felt like I understood things that others couldn't. And I think that's a similar aspect of the journey. But I'd be interested in exploring, because we mentioned before, we've spoken before about why we need to have. I love that bit when you said, "Does it make it official if you pay for it?" That's something I would love to explore, because that sounded really fascinating. That's a really good comment. What other there's
I don't know if
there's
the
out there, but I'm interested. So you've realised you fitted in, you've smelt things that were right, you bring approaches to work, you've grown and so forth, and then you had that inkling, which maybe you had an internal insight, but for you, you're just you. But then other people that you're meeting, in the past several years, so are saying, "Have you? Do you? You should." Which people said to me, which then changes your internal narrative and makes you explore more and so on. So, where are you now? Where are you now on this journey of discovery? You've mentioned various individuals having spoken with you, signposted you. Okay, you've had those individuals say stuff to you, but where are you now? Where are you on that journey of, breathing in and understanding where you are as, and I'll use the term ADHD, where you are as you, so to speak. Where are you?
So, I mean, as I said, I'm kind of where I was before, like in a weird way, like, and again, I don't know if maybe, because this is where, something I've been thinking about loads recently. I can't stop thinking about this particular thing, about you know, where's personality, where's ADHD, where is that just that's Sam, or that's I've been like that because of ADHD, and one of those things which I think is protective for me in this diagnostic. I can't speak to everyone else who maybe has had that sort of diagnosis process, because of the ADHD or that impulse, you know. I've moved on doing other stuff now, you know, and it does kind of work like that. And I've always had that emotionally. I get things, whoomp, they go like that, and then they're gone. And what I've had to do in my life is kind of find things that channel that a bit, because sometimes if they go whoom, that's not good. You can do a lot of damage at the whoom, even if you're better the next 5 minutes later. So all my activities are all based around that kind of get as much of that out, so that even when I get an emotion, it kind of goes off, it goes to the side. I'm using really technical terms here, aren't I?
No, it's lovely.
They're good.
But it is like that, and you know, I've had a couple of recent experiences where I think actually thinking of it differently as ADHD has helped, because I've kind of put a support in place. So like I've always known that what I feel on one day could be entirely different. And I could literally have the different perspective the next day and be really convinced on both days. So I'll give you an example that's nothing to do with anything really other than my life. But the gym, I've been thinking about quitting the gym. Don't worry, Simon, the beach will still be that way. And just working out at home, because I can spend more time with my family. I'll save a bit of money. I've got a fair bit of kit at home. It's sunny now, blah, blah, blah. And I was so convinced. And I begged and borrowed loads of stuff, set up like a bit of sheltered area in the garden, blah, blah, did it all. Did it for a day. It's a stupid idea. I'm not doing it. It's just ridiculous. I don't even know why I thought like that in the first place. And so now, but I didn't quit my membership, because I kind of had a feeling, however I feel now is likely to change. It's like the weather. So now I'm kind of managing it from a sort of, this is not just, Sam, you're a bit crap, you need to work on this. This is actually, okay, without support, this isn't going to change. And it's similar with admin. I've had a similar thing with work and booking families in, and we've moved to an online booking system now, because I've gone from thinking, Sam, you stop being crap at admin, you're bad, sort it out. Although I'm not that self-loathing about it, but you know, stop being rubbish, just get better, to actually, you're nearly 40. Nearly 40, like loads off by not less than a year, but it's not going to change. Just change everything around it.
So have you, I'm looking at the comparativeness between journeys here. Have you started, I mean, you've worked with loads of awesome individuals over those decades and so on. Have you started to, if I may say, if you start to look at yourself almost externally and apply the thoughts you may have applied, if that's if you understand what I'm saying, as you may have done to people that you were, do you see what I mean? Have you gone, okay, look, if I was looking at me, this is what I'd do. Have you changed approaches like that somewhat?
Oh, do you know what? I hadn't actually thought of it like that, as in I hadn't consciously done that. But yeah, effectively, that is what I'm doing. I'm going, okay, Sam struggles with this. He needs that. You know, no amount of consequence is going to work, because it hasn't in my life. There have been consequences that have been big and severe enough to make me try and change stuff, but no amount of consequence, external or otherwise, has changed it. So yeah, it's really nice to step outside of myself, apply everything that I've applied to children and young people, because I've never thought consequence is an effective way to learn for someone that's in the moment.
That's good, because that's being kinder to yourself with the things. Like, I think the thing that's always really key is that there will be a number of things as neurodivergent people that we maybe cannot change, that are relatively fixed, but it's not loads. There's a number of things that are relatively fixed that we need to be kinder to ourselves about. And then there's going to be things that if we want and feel that they are able to change or be supported to change, then they can. But I think we need to be kind to ourselves with the things that we can't. So like you say, if you really struggle with admin, so Annette is autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic with attention differences and gives themselves such a hard time at 50, even though we support so many neurodivergent people, they're much kinder to everybody else than themselves. And they really struggle with a number of things, including admin. Sending emails takes them days, like literally days to write an email because they're so worried it's not going to read right and all this kind of thing. And it's like, you're 50. You know, if you can't do it and it's that hard and it's spending taking up so much of your energy in your spoons, find somebody else who's good at that stuff and feel okay about that. Because you kind of joked about today in the sense of, so for people who won't know, a few weeks back, Sam was like emailing, do you want to do a webinar soon on XYZ? I was like, yeah, sure. Do you want to come on Aucademy and do a session on your ADHD discovery journey? And Sam's like, oh yeah, that's great. Went to the doodle poll himself and booked it, which means it was booked. The date was booked.
Sounds
and
worse
then so it was booked. And I didn't do it for you. And then last week I sent Sam a speaker document to say, you know, the session's coming up. Can you send some details so I can put it in the event thing? And he's like, what's this for? And when
not even like, sorry, I forgot that was tonight. It was literally like, what are we doing?
Yeah, like, what is this for? And I was like, for the talk on ADHD discovery journey. It's like, what was this? When was this booked? I was like, Sam, you booked it.
I think it's because when we were talking, the only way I saw, because the thing is, when I saw it, I was like, awesome. I'd love to do that. You know, when I worked out what it was. And I think when I first got it, I felt like that. Because when I first got it, we were also talking about a webinar. My brain's gone that way and everything else is just on the roadside somewhere, you know, left in a pile. So it wasn't
your joke back was like further evidence,
yes,
like, or something, wasn't it? Like
fairly, yeah. I just wanted to, can I just pick up on something you said though, Chloe, because it interests me about the being kinder and what you said about Annette. And I think the way I look at it, and I've looked at it in, you know, supportively, but also now in myself, is that, okay, it's not about me being crap at admin. It's just that I need this thing to do the admin. With Annette, if she says she's not so good either with the admin stuff, so she'd need maybe a PA or some augmented stuff or a calendar or, you know, something to do it. If someone that was really good at admin is probably going to need quite a lot of support, and this is generalizing, writing a play, because they might not be that creative. So they might need someone to help with the writing. They might need to use one of them, or you could use them story dice or whatever that you throw, and it gives you a little sort of framework to make something creative up. So do you know what I mean? It's just you can't all be good at everything, because that's not how the human brain is. So it's kind of like just figuring out what your assistants are, what you're going to need, because people that
I think, sorry, go on.
No, and just the being kind to yourself bit, that is another little thing where I feel very lucky. And again, because I've sort of snitched my mum up, I probably should say something nice about my parents. But if they did one thing, it was instill me with such a strong sense of ego that I never really question myself. If I'm shit at something, there's probably someone else's fault a little bit, and also, well, I'm good at everything else, so do one, you know.
So then that makes me really interested. So I want to bring this up because I want to come back to what does ADHD mean to actually all three of you. No, it's fine. And I expected it to meander anyway, and I don't want to take that question away from everybody. But I am interested in discussing one of the key things that seem to occur for not all, but the majority of people who experience attention differences, which is rejection sensitivity. I don't necessarily like the word dysphoria, because I do feel that sometimes that rejection sensitivity is based on reality, that you have felt rejected multiple times, and then it becomes an extreme sensitivity. And only in very rare cases, i.e. maybe yourself and Louis, have I met ADHDers who don't necessarily have that rejection sensitivity. And I find that really interesting because it has very psychological well-being, like protective properties, when you are just like, no, it's everyone else, not me. Whilst at the same time being a bit problematic sometimes when you maybe don't take responsibility for the things that maybe you should take responsibility. So can we
just point out at 40, that's been my work on. That has been, I'm better now at being like, it probably isn't everyone else's fault, Sam. It's probably yours, to be honest. But with a pinch of salt, you know.
Good. Okay, that sounds good. Because Ben, can I ask you? I know that rejection sensitivity is quite a difficult one for you, isn't it? And Tigger, I don't know. Do you feel you have? Obviously, lots of human beings experience rejection sensitivity in some form. Nobody likes to feel rejected, even if it's not necessarily that you have been rejected, it's just the sense that you have. But then you've got that heightened sense of rejection sensitivity. So I'll try and give a concrete example. Your friend doesn't reply to your text message within the hour or something. And instead of going, oh, they're probably busy, or they just haven't looked at their phone, or not even thinking about it because you're just too busy doing your own stuff, going straight to, they must hate me. And then I'll do the song that Sai keeps singing recently, which is, I suppose I'll go and eat worms, and things like this. So, Ben, can you describe what that feels like or what you experience when it comes to rejection sensitivity?
Yeah, pretty much like you already said. It's kind of any logical reaction that you might feel. Well, a normal, like an NT logical reaction is out the window. Like someone could literally not reply in 5 minutes, and I might think, oh, well, why don't they want to talk to me? And I can see them online or something, and I think all the possible scenarios of what I've done or is something wrong. And then an hour later, I could think, oh, why did I react that way? Why was I so sensitive? And it's kind of like an unconscious feeling that I can't exactly explain. And it can really affect relationships and friendships and everything, because you can push people away who don't understand or want to understand because they don't get this kind of involuntary reaction that you can't help but feel. And I feel I've definitely experienced that a lot, especially growing up and friendships and dating, and even just with family, it's always around me, I'd say.
Ben, can I just ask, because when you started describing that, and I thought it was really, you said you couldn't quite articulate it, but you really did. I thought it was an awesome description. But you started off when someone didn't reply to a text, it sounded like your head immediately goes, what have I done wrong? And it sounds like it's immediately something you must have done wrong. And again, that's interesting because I think that's where maybe there's a difference, because for me it's, why is he being a twat? You know, it's immediately, he's been a bit out of order. And I don't know where that comes from or what that is, but does that make sense? That sounds like a sort of completely different experience that is probably protective for me, whereas for you, that must be quite a difficult thing.
Yeah. I'd say I have your reaction too, but I think mine's more delayed. So I'd have the initial, what have I done? And then once I've maybe got clarity on the situation, my head will spin. I'd be like, why are you being like this? And I can't, it's a weird feeling. And it's sometimes like just a switch that something will just change in my head, and I'd finally have that logical answer.
Do you stay on that though? So like, say you see the text from, or you send the text to the friend, you don't get a response, you see it online. How long does that feeling stick? Because again, for me, even if I was a bit like, oh, that's harsh, like they've completely binned me off, I'd be doing something else within 10 minutes and I'd have forgot it. Is that for you? Is it more that do you kind of ruminate on it for quite a while?
I guess it depends on the person and the situation. If it's someone I mean, even if it's just someone I've spoken to for like a day, I'll still get like quite upset reaction. Say for the rest of the evening, I'll be loving spoons, maybe shut down, and then the next day I wake up and I'll be happy, or I won't even remember. And even with someone I've known for a long time, I'd be the same. I'd have that severe reaction straight away, and I'd be in meltdown, shut down. I'd be like having bad thoughts, and then next day it's just out of my head, and I'm focusing on something else.
But see, that is interesting because to me that does still sound like a long time to be thinking about it. But I know what you mean. It's kind of gone the next day completely. But yeah, it's just interesting. What about you, Tigger? Do you have the rejection sensitivity thing?
Yeah, I have a close friend that calls it my catastrophe journey. And so I regrettably can see facial expressions. I can hear tonal qualities in those that I'm close to and automatically know that something's wrong. And then I will knee-jerk. And then I go down what I think my partner's called, or I've coined the phrase catastrophe journey. And then it is, oh my God, why? And it is usually, it must be me. And then how long that journey takes, I think, depends overall upon how many spoons are in place at that time. You know, the less spoons, the longer the journey will take. But it is always the same journey. It is always a knee-jerk. It always is from a comment, a text, a tonal quality, a situation, something. And then boom, it's like an explosion. It's like it's a straight down the catastrophe route. And then it's just, you just crawl my way back. You just crawl your way back. And eventually, you know, part of the Tigger brain comes along and then just goes boom, 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 puts it all into place, and I move on. And it is almost like somebody flicks a switch. It's almost like, a new one goes boom. It's like there's a change in situational responses. There's a change in what's going on at the time. A new thought enters my head or something. But it's always that knee-jerk, straight to catastrophe. This is the worst thing ever, and it's me. And then that journey then depends upon, what spoons are in place. And then sometimes it's a gradual incline, and sometimes it's just like somebody flicks a switch, and I just go, oh, for God's sake, that makes total sense. That's why. And I find that fascinating because I wish to God I had more responses which were, that makes total sense, rather than, oh my God, and boom, I'm off. Because that could devastate me sometimes for days.
It's interesting because I was listening to both of you talk then, and I was thinking actually what I'm doing is I'm kind of describing how I am now. But I must admit, when I was younger, particularly sort of 20s, early 30s, it wasn't like yeah, I guess it's still a rejection sensitivity. It's just the process for me was, oh, they don't like me, they're upset with me, better make them like me then. And I'll do and not even like people pleasing, but just okay, so say we're in a room of 5 guys, because again, I'm from a rugby background, sport background, it's very blokey, there's lots of sort of alphaing going on. So if we're in a room with 5 people and this guy clearly doesn't like me, or I felt like some rejection sensitivity from him, okay, mate, they're all going to like me. We're going to get them. We're going to get them on board. And then you have to love me with everyone else. Love me, I'm an only child. That sort of business. Well, I guess that's probably still a sensitivity, but it's more like my brain goes, oh, okay, that's not happening. Let's what can I do about it? How can I do something about it? But then again, I also don't know if that's because I'm not feeling it as strongly as you two, because it doesn't, maybe it's not as overwhelming. So
I wonder if there's a couple of things here, because this kind of leads into something else I wanted to talk about, which is the crossover and the overlap between being autistic and ADHD. So there's a couple of things. So I want to flag Paula Rice's comment, which is, I wonder if rejection sensitivity is connected to trauma. And I feel strongly that it is. I think that's why I struggle to call it dysphoria per se. So it's RSD is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I struggle to use the word dysphoria because I think it's based on reality, even if it's not the reality at that point in time. So what I mean by that is, when we are different, even if we don't know and have a word for it, we are called out for being different. People will treat us differently. like you said, it might be that they say they don't like you, Sam, and you're like, right, you're going to like me. It might be that people call us names, and it might be worse. It could be, you know, quite extreme bullying, victimization, and abuse, for instance. And I think eventually, if that happens enough, like complex post-traumatic stress, it just eats into you until it becomes a sort of part and parcel of who you are as well, to some extent, with that rejection sensitivity. That's not to say that you can't have support to work on it, so that maybe the gap between, so like the way Ben described it, so maybe the gap between the Tigger, the catastrophizing, and then eventually the sort of logic, maybe the gap can get smaller. And I would say, like I say, I'm a human being. I have experienced feelings of feeling rejected. But I think that I've learnt to balance it. So this is the thing, what you would always want, and never really happens with any human being, is you want to externalize the things that you can't really change, or that are actually potentially going to really harm you psychologically and like your well-being. And then you want to take responsibility. So when I say internalize, I don't mean in that sense of taking it on board, and that could become quite negative. What I mean is when you can take responsibility for something because it can be changed, taking responsibility. So you want that balance, right? So that you're not always just blaming yourself, which maybe Ben and Tigger are doing. And you don't necessarily want to externalize it all the time either. You want a bit of balance, which is really hard to do. I try and force like my brain to do that. So recently, somebody was trying to give me a bit of feedback. So we did our autistic discovery program with 14-year-olds. Tough crowd. And one of the 14-year-olds dropped out, and they sent an email to the people who were hosting us, because we didn't want to have their email addresses and things. There was no need for us to have that personal information. So the school, and they were like really trying not to tell me that this pupil had written to say they were dropping out because they were bored. And I just said, that's fine. They're allowed to be bored. That's not to say that I am boring or that our program is boring, but that it wasn't a match for them. And I think we're so used to taking those things personally, whereas I try to see it as just didn't work for that person. And that's really hard. There was an initial, like a split second, where my brain went, oh no, they didn't like it. Why didn't they like it? Why didn't they love it? Why aren't they blah, blah, blah? And then I immediately went to, no, they're 14. They're self-advocating as well, which is fantastic, which we want for them to say, I don't want to do it. It's not for me. It's boring. That's fine. I don't know where I've gone with this. But yeah, I think trauma does have a big part to play. So it sounds like your parents have given you some good psychological protective properties by giving you called it an ego, but yeah, having some, you know, psychological protective properties.
Big ego. But yeah, but the other thing with that is like, that's not to say I don't feel like, I mean, I've certainly had events in my life that I don't want to talk about particularly, but that were really traumatic. I don't know if Paula means specifically rejection trauma for being neurodivergent though, or whether just trauma in general, because
I think it can be any forms of rejection. It doesn't have to mean specifically based on our neurodivergence or being different, but that's usually why people are picked on, is there's that mismatch.
There's differences. Yeah. See, again, like, so I've certainly, I had that. I remember being at primary school, I was very quiet because I sometimes wouldn't quite get it right and then would be pushed out of the group. So I'd be really quiet. And then when I went to secondary school, it just went completely the other way. And I worked out that I could be in the group by just being the piss taker. And that's where I was. Bang. But it doesn't mean, I don't know, maybe this is going to sound a bit crass but that word trauma is so big. It could mean so many different things to so many different people. What does it even mean when you say you have a trauma response? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we sort of define exactly what is a trauma to someone? Because obviously what's traumatic, I might have experienced the same situation as someone else, and they've gone away feeling so traumatized that they don't ever want to socialize again. They quite rightly, don't want to put themselves. And I've gone, hang on. They laughed when I don't know, made a fart noise. Let's do more fart noises then. Or, do you know what I mean? Like, where's that line between what's a trauma response and what isn't? I
don't think we need to necessarily pick that apart, because the thing with trauma that's important, I guess, is that it's very subjective, and so we can't dictate what's trauma for each person. So trauma is the response in the body and the brain, not the event. So the traumatic event, it's the age-old question that lots of psychologists are always wanting to try and answer, which is why, if you have this person who's brought up in a similar way to this other person, and they're very similar in all sorts of ways, does this one develop depression or psychosis after a certain event or number of events, and this one doesn't? It's kind of the luck of the draw when it comes to why did we respond the way that we do. And it's just so complicated because we're such interesting cakes. Everything. I've got this thing about cakes at the moment, that we're all made up of certain ingredients. And when you can work out some of those ingredients, like, do you experience attention differences? Do you this? Do you that? I think, Ben, you did a post recently on your new page, Autisticality. Am I saying that right? Which is just a nice introduction to you. And it was like a circle with some of the key things about Ben. And when you know those things about yourself, then I don't know where I've gone with that either. I don't have attention differences.
You did a pretty good job of joining in right now.
I do a great job. This is this ongoing joke, because we can get into this. So this is where we're getting into this then, which is basically, let's discuss about the crossover. So I would say I feel quite confident that Sam, because I've spoken to Sam a number of times in the last couple of years, that you have attention differences, but I do not get an Auti-dar like pinging for you, right?
Well, even if you look at it through this lens?
No.
No, okay.
But I always felt that you were neurodivergent. You confused me quite a lot, actually, because when I first sort of I was like, I don't understand, why is this rugby player doing lives about neurodivergence? I'm very confused. But then when I listened to you and actually spoke with you, I was like, definitely neurodivergent. My neuroscope is working. But I don't feel an autistic vibe. I don't know what Ben and Tigger think. Do you get a sense of just the ADHD, as it were? Tigger's like, yeah. Ben? Any thoughts?
My Auti-dar's not that functioning yet.
I don't know if I can have you getting a dual diagnosis from a potato. Like, again, that's...
He's a very important
It's been a heavy couple of months.
What about their Dr. Potato? Will that help?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
A Dr. Potato.
Dr. Potato.
At least it's slightly more official, I suppose.
Whereas, so this is what I'm saying about this crossover, right? So there are no discrete boundaries. We are not talking in medical terms, because we're talking about beautiful, messy human brains. And so while I don't really feel a strong Auti-dar from you, like, at all, you're definitely neurodivergent. Whereas I always joke that I'm ready sorted autistic, because I feel that that's the most dominant thing about my experience on this planet, is as an autistic person. But then there's occasions where maybe my brain has that sort of attention differences, busyness and things like this. So this is why I'm always joking, I don't have attention differences. But it's because it's not the most prominent thing about my experience.
What flavour ADHD am I then?
What flavour?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because
can't be roast beef.
ADHD. Well, we always say about like a net, because they're autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic with attention differences. They're like a vegan, multicoloured rainbow sprinkled donut or something really exciting. Si is Rocky Road pickled onion and garlic flavour, which sounds absolutely disgusting, and I can taste it to some extent, and that's even worse because I have such hyperphantasia that's disgusting. Thanks for that, Si. Then we've got Ben, who is diagnosed autistic, and in the last, is it about the last year or so, you've been thinking?
Yeah, when I finished uni.
You've been thinking ADHD as well? And is it fair to say that maybe you're the reverse, like your autistic nature is maybe the most dominant, and that's maybe why you've not worked out the ADHD stuff? And then Tigger, wait, where's Tigger on my screen? Tigger? I can't do it. There we go. What's the most dominant, do you think?
Autistic.
Experience, neurodivergent, yeah.
Definitely. And then again, definitely.
Oh, and people are joking, like, we believe you, Chloe, that I don't have attention differences. I do think there's an element there. I just think it's not as prominent for me.
I worry that because obviously we were talking as well earlier about maybe having a chat about the renaming or the reclaiming of the, because attention differences, whilst I like it in the sort of differences side, from what I understand of ADHD, and I listened to a lot of a chap called Russell Barkley, and Sylvia was saying similar stuff. The core difference, if you like, is in the impulsivity. So if we then say attention differences, what you just did a minute ago, where you kind of lost your train of thought, that could come from loads of places. That wouldn't necessarily be an impulsivity, whereas usually it's as far as I experience it, it's I was saying this, I had the impulse to say something else and make a rubbish joke about my hair. Well, where was I again? Like, it goes off somewhere. So I don't know if, yeah.
That helps. Okay. So this is where I feel, so I'm not an impulsive person in any capacity, including within my brain. My brain is a very logical A to B, doing all the branches and seeing all the things. And sometimes my picture thinking and the logic tree, I get a bit lost with it, and that's when I get lost. And it's not an impulsivity, I don't think, thing. So that's actually quite helpful. And you're right, because I'm always, I say obviously, but I'm always trying to depathologize any neurodivergent experience. And I have been told by another ADHDer, because we still haven't got a word that we can use at the moment, that attention differences, when I use that term, is still as an outsider, and that's the thing that I've observed. Does that make sense? So where we always have frustration around neurotypical people describing our experiences because they get it wrong, they are usually talking about the things that they observe as the most prominent and ignoring or not understanding that actually, for us as autistic people, for instance, the sensory processing differences should come first and paramount, not the so-called repetitive patterns of behaviour and et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm very aware that by saying attention differences, I'm making that the most prominent and dominant thing. And actually, I've been told that it's not necessarily that. But what can we say instead? Because it would be nice to have something to reclaim.
I vote the hunter-gatherer gene, because there's a book called that, I think, but it's all, that suits me, to me, I feel like the spontaneity, the impulsivity, that has to be in there somewhere, because to me that is the core of all of it. And there was even when they used to split, because they don't even split it anymore, do they? They used to have ADHD and ADD, and the way that Russell Barkley describes it, which I really like, is that ADHD was the impulse of the body, and ADD is the wandering or the impulse of the mind. But either way, it's an impulse thing. And the core sort of executive functioning difference, although you would describe it as a deficit in that it's not working in the same way, but arguably it then leads the way open to loads of wonderful things, but would be your mind break, your inhibition control, your impulse control. And that's where, if you're supporting someone, you have to support them in a way that understands if there's something that could happen, it could happen before they've thought of it. So for you to punish them consequentially is a load of nonsense, because they'll literally go, oh yeah, sorry, and then the impulse comes in. So you have to have proactive support that kind of manages that impulse control. So yeah, to me, that impulsivity, again, you know, we've talked about roses and, you know, would they smell as sweet if they were called something else, Chloe? And I think, you know, again, I will reiterate, they would smell like a rose, but if you called it a stinking arse, you wouldn't sniff it in the first place. So if you call it impulsivity, it's a bad thing. If I'm impulsive, oh, that's Sam, he's so impulsive, he doesn't think things through, he's done this, he's jumped over here, he bought one of them, he burnt that down, maybe not, allegedly. And so if it's spontaneous, oh, he's spontaneous. He takes the bull by the horns or the cow by the balls, whatever the expression is. No, it wouldn't be a cow then, would it? Anyway, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of, so I don't know, spontaneous bastards. Is we call them that? No.
And I would be interested. I think the reason I'm also asking is we've been commissioned to look at a local NHS document and to try and make it very neurodivergent based and led, which is very exciting. And it was really easy to write down the definition and why we should be using identity first language when we're talking about autistic people. Why we should be using person first language for learning disabled people at this point in time, because that is the community preference. And then we got to the ADHD bit and we were a bit stuck because we don't want to use ADHD because it's got the word deficit and disorder in there. And we couldn't, because there's, maybe it's a little bit of a joke as well that the ADHD community hasn't come together to like focus on like, what are we going to call this?
We've definitely thought about it loads of times, just probably not forgotten.
Yeah, well, you got the same bit in the PDA community as well. It's where that bit where we are still stuck in that element of that words create an aspect of reality, don't they? And it's that I think gets in the way sometimes. Whatever, be it a rose or, you know, impulsivity or whatever, it still creates an aspect of reality in terms of how we interpret it.
100%. And, you know, like you said, ADHD, so attention, which we've already discussed, is possibly not even at the core of it, and disorder. So that's we're off to a bad start in the ADHD world. But, you know,
but in like terms with of everything, because it's written by neurotypical people looking at somebody and yeah.
But then I find that this bit I find hard because I still don't feel like I've got any right to speak for anybody else who's got ADHD in terms of a community, because maybe I've just been lucky, but there are probably lots of people that have really struggled because of their ADHD and or the environment they're in, arguably. And so it's harder for them to not see it as that disordering thing. But again, you know, it goes full circle because I think we all realise that if we change the environment and the expectations, you know, like the attention thing, you said like a lack of attention. Now, admittedly, I'm doing quite a large proportion of the talking, so there's less attention needed. But when you guys are talking, because I'm chewing, because I'm fiddling, and because I've, you know, got other tabs, that, you know, I'm hearing everything. 100% attention, and we've nearly done an hour. We've done over an hour. I don't attend to things for an hour without falling asleep very often at all, but I'm interested. So when the interest is there and when the allowances are made, this is not an attention problem at all.
No,
you know, it's no.
And those things can be relatively straightforward to implement as well. So we attended a lovely accessibility school. It's not a special school. It's an accessibility school. They do refer to themselves probably as a special education school, but they're an accessibility school. And lovely pupils of different neurodivergence experiences. And we let them all, because we were just there to do a sort of an assembly thing. But for 2 hours, we had their attention and they were really engaged for a whole 2 hours. And two of them 3 of the groups were year 7. So we're talking like 11-year-olds who are neurodivergent, staying engaged for like 2 hours because we were new. There's also that, people. And we allowed everyone to come and grab a STEM object, and made them feel that that was absolutely fine to, you know, be concentrating on things. You know, those allowances, not even allowances. Hold on, they're chatting to each other in the private chat. I'm going to ignore it because I'm going to get distracted.
Oh, you're going to have the impulse to answer there, Chloe. So maybe we have got some information.
No impulse to answer. Just it gets distracting. I'm adamant. I don't even know why I'm adamant. I think largely it's because just with Louis, he's just such a different kettle of fish to me. And like I say, with him, his attention differences, which is what I observe. So I'm not talking about how he experiences spontaneity, impulsivity, and so on. I'm talking about from an outsider's perspective, his attention differences are very prominent to me. That's the thing that's most observable about him. Whereas with me, I don't think that necessarily is the case. I think my autistic nature is a bit more. I don't know anymore. What even is autism?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thought we did read the autism, but what is it to be autistic? What is it to be neurodivergent?
Yeah.
You know, actually, just another one as well. I'm sure you've probably mentioned this before, Chloe. I'm probably repeating what I've heard from you at some point. But special needs. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Because what that does is say that these people's needs are special, but actually everyone's got needs. Yep. And you're kind of categorizing their needs as well. They're fine. Those needs are all right. Yours are special.
I can't remember accessibility needs, or I saw something. It was something so that because it is a particular type of school, it is a school for neurodivergent pupils, disabled pupils in different capacities. So it is useful to have language, but it's definitely not a special education school. It's like I say, it's an accessibility school. Or I'm sure I saw something recently about ways that we could describe it that's not stigmatizing.
I've just realised you can scroll on this private chat as well.
I have no idea what this is.
Thought of anything, Ben?
I'm still thinking.
Put you on the spot. Can I ask one question? Oh, go on, Ben.
No, that's just me still thinking.
I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to ask one question. Can you self-identify as an ADHD and feel okay with that, or do you need an identification-stroke diagnosis?
Are you asking everybody, or me, or
you?
Okay, I didn't want to go in first every time, but you know,
you're the guest.
You're here to talk about ADHD as well, so yeah. It's going to happen, whether I'm the guest or not. But yeah, I would say so. But then again, I feel like I'm quite fortunate in the way I've experienced it. You know, I'm at a point in my life. If this had happened maybe 10 years ago, when hang on, no, it's more than 10 years ago now. Christ, when did I go to university? So old. Anyway, if it had happened when I just, completely bummed out of university, I wonder if then I would have got much more of a, oh no, yeah, this is ADHD. I'm what is it? Especially if it had been presented in the medical way. I'm broken. I'm always going to be like this. I'm never going to be able to fix this. Blah blah blah. So I guess it was the timing really helped. But I would say, to be honest, Tigger, as well, the way I went about the journey is quite me, in that I've never been that bothered about official papery things, mainly because I can never get to the end of them to get them myself anyway. But I did want to make sure it wasn't just my thoughts. Do you know what I didn't? Because I've been in and around the community for so long, I didn't know which way I felt about it. Interestingly, I didn't know if I wanted it to be the case or not. I had both on a daily basis, but I wanted to make sure that didn't get in the way of the process, if you like, of the decision. So that's why Sylvia was so important, because I knew that she knew me, but she's not like someone I see lots. And also I knew she was meticulous as only a sort of psychologist, doctor of psychology can be, and she would go through it, and she'd be the first to say no, it's not the case. But she didn't say that at all.
We had that brief discussion because I am at this moment in time, though I may change that viewpoint, really happy that I'm just me. Yeah. And just me happens to be awesomely autistic. Yeah. Maybe a bit of ADHD as well, working that one out. I find I've been identified by my neurokin professionals, as I call them. And I've been so grateful in some ways that I have. And I'm not drawn towards the let's find out what's wrong with you, Tigger, and tick it from a clinician's viewpoint. In fact, I'm very against it at this moment in time. But I think, historically, people have known me and people that have met me since have gone, oh God, yeah, mate, definitely Tigger. But it's interesting because there's still that, I still have conversations. We had that conversation, we said, do you think you will go down that route? And, and I still have those conversations. Well, people say, do you think you should? And I'm still thinking, no. Why? Why should I? Why should I sit down with somebody who's not my neurokin, so to speak, and have them tick off where I've gone wrong? And I was interested about, because there's a lot of stuff, on the, Facebook, internet, and so on about people self-identifying, how self-identification is valid as an autistic individual. And it's something I haven't looked at in the ADHD world, if I can call it that, about self-identification being valid there. And I must confess, I might explore that after this and to see what's out there in that global community.
I guess one of the differentials there might be that, particularly with children and young people, unfortunately, whilst there are medications that autistic children and young people will be put on, it's not as much of an automatic as with ADHD. So a lot of the parents particularly will want that official.
I think I quantify that where we're saying I'm looking at adults. I have to be honest with all the kids and families I work with. I often say, yep, get a diagnosis, identification, because if you don't, the particular school may not do X, Y, and Z. So no, I'm quantifying that by saying, sorry, I'm very much looking at adults, I must confess, in terms of that process of validation.
Sure. That might still even apply to adults though, because adults might want. I wanted some Ritalin. That's the first thing I asked Sylvia. I was like, have you decided yet so I can get some bloody Ritalin or what? Apparently not. So great.
Apparently it only has, it doesn't, it's like most meds. So like people who might take anti-anxiety or antidepressants, it doesn't have this massive effect on you. It has a small effect. So I think Louis describes it as it just helps just a little bit focus or a little bit of this, a little bit. It's not like this huge effect that you might experience. And actually that brings me to,
so I was just going to say I did it at uni, and it was slightly different for me. I did most things at uni, but I had about 3 hours where I sat completely silent, which is, as you can probably tell, very unlike me. And I think I may have solved world peace, world hunger. I'm pretty sure I got us to Mars, but I can't remember any of it. So I was like, my head was like, everything was working, like one of them computer systems all clunking into place. But I couldn't be asked to do anything about it. So I don't know if Louis feels the same or, whether other people experience that, but there you go.
Well, and the fact that even that should just show you, because if you give ADHD meds to somebody who doesn't experience ADHD, it will just get them high. Whereas if you give it to an ADHDer, it helps them potentially focus. So that's one way that you can say that the recognition. Are you
saying that should be part of the self-identification? Because I like that idea, Chloe.
Well, no, I'm definitely not pushing for people to take drugs that they're not supposed to. No. And Victoria here says, as an adult, I've needed support, so they needed that formal identification, which, and I think that's when, sadly, in this day and age, at the moment, the way our society works, particularly, certain societies, so the UK at least, it is important still, sadly, for that formal identification by non-autistic people, non-ADHDers, so that you might get the support that you needed. It would be nice if we can get to a place where, if we're disabled by society, we get the help we deserve, not based on whether a non-autistic or a non-ADHD tells us we're autistic and so on.
Sorry, and they really sorry. It's the only time she might. Oh, can you see her? I'll take the blur off. She's
it's
right.
Pebbles?
Mrs. Pebbles. Yeah, what's she doing?
Mrs. Pebbles.
It's all right. Say hello. Who's this? Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
so cute.
She's a very old lady. Sorry to interrupt. She just got up. I'm going to have
No,
to
it's
let her
worth
out,
the
I think.
interruption. I was
It
just
is worth
concerned
the
it wasn't like one of like the potato filter sort of thing as well that you run.
She doesn't she? Well, I'll put you down. Go on then.
Will everyone end up being a potato? Be a potato party? It'd be
No, as
fantastic.
in like it wasn't really a dog; it was a person, but they were on a filter. Or something.
Oh, I see. And Victoria finishes by saying medication only lasts for a few hours. It turns the volume down. So just saying, yeah, how that affects them. I do feel that because I'm quite sensitive to medications, I can imagine. I mean, caffeine affects me a lot, and so that's also another way. My sort of teacher, sort of my colleagues, thought I was joking when we were describing and discussing a student that they were concerned about, and they were describing them, and I was thinking that student sounds like they experience ADHD, and I asked, do they drink a lot of coffee and like energy drinks? And they started laughing because they thought I was making a joke about ADHD. I said, no, I'm being serious, because that's one way. The coffee, the caffeine, and the energy drinks have a very different effect on an ADHDer. And they were like, actually, yeah, they do. And I was like, you might want to actually support them to recognise they probably experience ADHD.
So the Dr. Chloe method to assessing ADHD appears to be involving a cocktail of illegally procured Ritalin and energy drinks. That's what I'm hearing.
Definitely not. I am not advocating for that at all.
And just see what happens. Let's have a party.
Definitely not. So
there was a question about exercise that's similar to that, I think, in terms of.
That's what I wanted to ask, actually. Yeah. So because you play a lot of sports. I
don't anymore. My knees are broken to pieces, but yeah, I did play a lot of sports.
I do not do exercise. I went to the osteopath today because I'm in a lot of pain. Ben is like, nope, no exercise, no running, no things. Ew. I do not exercise. And yeah, I went to the osteopath today because I've been so sedentary for the last couple of years that my back is just absolutely shot. Whereas you do a lot of exercise. You said about the gym. Louis is very similar, and he learnt because he also didn't recognise wasn't recognised as autistic with attention differences or ADHD until he was in his 30s and mid 30s, I think. But he'd worked out, I guess, from trial and error, that exercise actually helped him. And I do wonder then, so I put here, do you think the sport and exercise that you do is related to ADHD? And also because I've seen people describing, like ADHD is on like TikTok or Instagram, talking about getting the dopamine hit. So you're always looking for that dopamine hit. So for people who aren't aware, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. We all have it. We all use it. It does a multitude of functions, including actually supporting movement, like motor movement. But it also is a drug or neurochemical that can make you feel happy and things like that. So yeah, do you think your sport and exercise is related to ADHD and dopamine hits?
Can I answer Simon's first?
You can. Okay, Simon's question, for people who can't read it, is would you rather live with a permanently drunk ostrich or a cheese-stealing alligator?
I mean, Simon, you come up with the best questions in some ways because they're so elaborate and odd, but they're actually often quite easy. That's a no-brainer. I want to live with a pissed-up ostrich. I don't want to live with some alligators stealing my cheese. Nobody steals my cheese, alligator or not. I'll take you down like Steve Irwin, mate.
I don't know, ostrich, they can be quite aggressive. And if it's drunk,
you could push him over. Like, it'd be fine. It'd be funny. It'd be hilarious. Imagine a drunk ostrich. How fun. I mean, they're quite funny-looking things anyway. Yeah, drunk ostrich every time. Exercise. Yeah, the dopamine thing, because obviously you can get dopamine from loads of different things, can't you? I'd imagine people that love knitting get a bit of dopamine out of it, whereas for me it would just evaporate my entire soul. But you know,
doing knitting.
Yeah, God. So for me, I noticed that if something gives me that dopamine, I cannot stop doing it. Like it draws me back in every 5 minutes. With exercise, very similar, but equally, what I find with the exercise is, whilst it can lead into a sort of unhealthy, I've got to do it to feel better. It does also regulate me for the rest of the day, and particularly, I think one of the things that's really helped me in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and I think it happened by chance initially, but is shifting my training to first thing in the morning. Because, and I had to, so I started doing it when I was, I think, managing Cedar maybe, or had started business. There was a period of time where I was having to do a lot of de-escalations with people that were really distressed and unfortunately unsafe a lot of the time. And it was taking its toll a bit. And the way I started coping with that is if I went into work knackered, kind of, not like sleep, but no physical energy. It just, everything worked better, and I could do it better and sort of go away and feel okay. And I was doing, and I was much more relaxed with the children, and that was helping them. So that was, for me, it's like, okay, no brainer. So that's sort of shifted, and I've done that ever since. And I'll get up 3:30, 4, get to the gym, do 1 to 2 hours there, and it's not
the middle of the night.
No, it's middle of the day.
No, I don't get up. I do not. Very rarely will I allow people to make appointments with me before 11 a.m. because I'm still in bed at 9.
But there's an ADHD. There is an ADHD thing, and a really good book that kind of relates to it is called Deep Work. Can't remember who wrote it. Deep Work, standard ADHD reference there. Great book. Can't remember who wrote it. Probably just read the last chapter. But it's all about, like, if you can figure out when you're at your best and just really focus on that, and don't bother with the times that you're not. So, like, if I sit at a computer and I've got something to do and I can't get it done, I've got 2 little shifts that I'll do. First, I'll try multitasking. So I literally I'm not going to do this report. I'm going to do this report and the dishes and maybe some chin-ups outside, and I'm just going to rotate. And sometimes that'll help with the report. Sometimes it's almost worth me going, do you know what? No, it's literally not going to happen. I'm going to sit here for 20 minutes. I'm going to open 30 tabs on my computer. I'm going to do a couple of emails that I wasn't going to do. So, maybe, probably not. Or I'll get halfway and forget I've done them. But this isn't going to happen. So I'm better off just parking it. And the time for me that I get loads of that sort of admin-y stuff that I find hard done is first thing in the morning. And I also find that, the last couple of, I don't know if anyone's watching that went to my last live presentation, but hopefully they won't leave a crap comment to show that it didn't work. But I did a lot of my presentation and slides in the gym in between sets, because I'd have my laptop up here. I'd do this, do a bit of that, one of them, through a few of those, a few which way's the beach, and then I'd do a slide, and everything's kind of firing. So
it's kind of,
until about 7.
When I do exercise, well, I used to work, 35 years ago, I worked in what I think then would be known as a secure unit. And I, beneath this aged Hulk, I used to get up for shifts in the morning at like 6, cycle to work. I used to do, so I'd cycle 6-7 miles. I'd be leaving at like 5:45. I then did like a 5-mile run. I used to do marathons, all the rest of it. I can't anymore because my cardio has been done and all the rest of that jazz. But I used to hunt out fitness, but I still am. So I keep pointing over there because there's a gym, there's some kettlebells and stuff like that. And I still, in my ripe old age, if I don't do my exercise first thing in the morning, and like you, if I'm doing a project, I cannot just concentrate on the project. I need either an album blaring or radio drama on. I have to have lots more going on to help me focus. If I'm just focusing on it, it's never going to happen. So I suspect there's that element of recognizing your strengths as well, isn't there? Recognizing what you need as an individual to get things done.
I wonder if Tigger's are ready salted, but with like that little vinegar sachet that you can add.
Yeah, what am I? Yeah, ready salted, a little bit of vinegar.
See, that's how I think of people. That's how it works, like I say.
Quavers.
And I just wanted to flag, so this is helpful. And this is really important because, sorry, it's like cutting off most of us at the bottom. And this is really important because actually, this is what I like. This is why I say everybody on Aucademy, doesn't matter where you are, is an educator learner. We are educator learners, and so are the people in the comment section, and particularly because I don't and have not experienced the use of ADHD meds. So Inga's letting me know that their personal experience is that different ADHD drugs, which operate on different systems, do make a significant impact. So if it hasn't helped, it is possible that a different dose or higher dose is needed. It's not the whole answer. Coaching and learning is needed also. Also, hopefully, changing the environment, because it might be, as like Sam's saying as well, and like we're always saying, we shouldn't be trying to hammer square pegs into round holes. And personally, I think ADHD meds have a huge impact. So I think that's important, because I said, from what I understood, but I haven't spoken to every ADHD ever, ADHD meds only had a small impact, but Inga's correcting me. So thank you.
Yeah, no, some people I've read that they say it's life-changing for them, but it still feels like it's not them and things like that. So it's, to me, we haven't got any good evidence of whether we'd even need frigging medication if we just changed the environment. And whilst I think I've talked lots of times with all of you probably here about the education system and, you know, how just not good it is for neurodivergent children and young people. But with ADHD in particular, whilst I'm sure this is true of other neurodivergent people, children and young people, the whole setup of a lesson is a non-starter. Like literally just the 40 minutes. We're going to do 40 minutes. Huh? No. What? Of one thing? No, that's not. Is it talking to someone about lots of things? Because otherwise I'm out. It just does not work.
So then, so we had Chris Bonello on recently to go through and discuss some of the key things from their huge survey that they've just done the results for. And something Chris says in other training that he does is that by today's standards, a number of us are disabled in a particular way. Whereas, and he's, for instance, Chris says, you know, he's very good at maths, he's very good at solving Rubik's cubes, all kinds of things like that. But he says that's by today's standards that he's good at those things. If he were born, you know, 1,000 years ago, he would be classed as disabled because he wouldn't know how to make a fire and he wouldn't be able to do those things. So now I'm thinking, you know,
or
the joking
genius,
about being
he'd a genius if he had a Rubik's cube. They'd be, what the fuck is that?
But it would be meaningless. It would be meaningless at that point in time, though. It would just be, it would make no sense. It's because at this point in time, our society, you know, worships, you know, maths and very particular ways that were supposed to be intelligent, in quotation marks, because intelligence is a very problematic idea anyway. Whereas you joke about this, about being a caveman and things like this, but actually the ADHD brain, you know, that spontaneous, impulsive brain probably would have done quite well. Exactly.
We'd all still be in Africa. But no, there's definitely an ADHDer that went, wonder what's over there. And got and the first one definitely had ADHD. Went, what's that? How do I get over there? Oh, fuck it, I'll just swim it. You know, like that's got to be an ADHDer, if that's the word we're going to, an impulsorizer.
Because this is the thing, because the things that are classed as deficits and so on are in relation to certain contexts. Whereas that impulsivity, the risk taking and the creativity that ADHD brains and people experience are really, can be very, very beneficial. It's and this is why I say everything, including, I know it must be quite difficult to experience rejection sensitivity to that extent, but everything has challenges and strengths, everything. So not just you as an individual have challenges and strengths, even those challenges and strengths themselves have challenges and strengths, right? As in dependent on the context. And the reason I say this, so I want to flag a couple of things. Sorry, oh, that's really covered me and Sam. Okay, hold on. Let's just move us just for a second. Actually, you don't need me. You don't need me. Yeah. Oh my God, Tigger, that was so cute. Do it again. That's great. Oh, autistic joy, just from the adorableness of Tigger, like popping their head up.
Just the head.
Just the head, it's so adorable. So Sai says here that about their experience of ADHD. So they say fleeting interests, intrusive thoughts and images, executive dysfunction, object and person permanence issue. So so for people who aren't too sure, that's that whole thing of if you can't see it, it doesn't exist, you forget it's there. And that can happen with people as well when you experience ADHD. Depression, difficulty following and maintaining conversations, difficulty focusing even without distractions or if they are of interest, forgetting to eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, impulsivity, financial difficulties, anxiety, sensory processing differences, poor sense of time, audio processing differences, mood swings, rejection sensitivity, trouble recalling words. So the thing is, again, when we look at that, I don't want to belittle that Sai feels that those things are difficult, but I do want to frame them in context, because fleeting interests are only, I say only, but they are a problem or a difficulty because society at this point in time doesn't like it when we don't stick with one thing and have that sort of loyalty to a particular thing. But in certain circumstances, that fleeting interest, that impulsivity and so on, and spontaneity and all those kinds of things is actually is a strength. I don't want to use terms like beneficial because we're going with capitalist ideas then. Any thoughts on any of these things? I'm going to take it off just purely because we need to see Tigger.
Okay, but I wanted that list again, if that's all right, Chloe.
Sorry, Tigger. Hold on. Let's just move.
It's only because I really love what you're saying, but then I was looking at some further down, and I was thinking that's easier to say for fleeting interests than financial difficulties. But even with financial difficulties, it's only recently that we've ever lived in a society where you could get loads of credit. So you wouldn't, if you run out of whatever, say you were back in cavemen days, they all traded shells. You'd look at your pile of shells and go, that's getting pretty low. I better go get some more bloody shells. Whereas now you can go, oh, I haven't got enough shells, but I can get a loan of 400 shells and I can pay it back at a month, and click, you're in financial difficulty. So even that. But a question back to Sai, who's not here because he's eating worms, if we remember. Some of that I definitely connect with. Some of it I really don't. And also, to me, there's quite a lot of it that isn't, like, when you say, is it my experience of ADHD or is it actually your experience of being you? Because again, like something like financial difficulties, anxiety, depression, these are not things that are exclusive to someone with ADHD. With the executive dysfunctioning, the fleeting interests, the forgetting things.
And I would certainly argue that it's like when people frustratingly will say, oh yeah, anxiety is part and parcel of being autistic. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be. That's not in even if I don't like the diagnostic checklist, it's not a diagnostic checklist thing. It's just that we're more likely to experience depression and anxiety, for instance, because we're in a society that isn't kind to us, that isn't set up for us.
Really
so I would say
we define everything by behaviors, but you don't know where a behavior comes from that is because your ADHD brain or because you're Sam and your parents did this and you fell off that bridge and whatever happened in your life. It's such a melting pot, isn't it?
And Victoria's point is trauma again.
Those
things that some of those things might be key to this thing called ADHD or spontaneity. What did you call it? What was it?
I can't remember.
Spontaneity something. I don't. Why am I asking? But yeah, whatever it is, impulsivity and spontaneity something. Which I think, that some of those things that Sai had listed might be related more specifically to spontaneity thing, whatever we're calling it, neurodivergence, spontaneity, neurodivergence. That'll do. But some of them definitely aren't. Depression and anxiety definitely aren't part and parcel necessarily. It's how society makes us feel. I like this. I know it's not meant to be funny, so I hope you don't mind me laughing, Inga. So Inga says, object permanence, both a strength and a challenge. I had forgotten about that. And that's me laughing at that bit because it's like the ADHD has forgotten that they have difficulty with object permanence, and that's not talked about enough. Yeah, I get accused of hiding things if I put things away, and we end up with multiple objects that we already have. Like we have like 4 tape measures in the house, because Louis forgets that we already exist, that, you know, one already exists. I don't know where we've gone. Okay, there was another comment that I wanted to grab that was, so because we had that, which is like a list of quite negative things, and Sam saying that you don't necessarily experience all of those. Tigger and Ben, do you feel that you could identify with a key some of those key things that Sai had listed?
Definitely with the interests. I'd say I've gone through countless hobbies, started packs of different hobbies and everything. Because I find it very hard to maintain just one. I think it's maybe perfectionism as well, but I can't focus unless I'm hyper focusing. There's no like middle ground. Like with gaming, I do gaming a lot, and then I will go for hours and hours, and not like what I said about forgetting to eat and sleep. I could be gaming till like 5 a.m. and not realize. And then I feel it massively overlaps with being autistic. I feel there's definitely overlaps with that. And I don't know, I think it's just the challenges with the stereotypical definition of ADHD that I think put me off self-identifying as ADHD, because I'd always known it to be, oh, it's just that kid at the back of the classroom who's making a lot of fuss. That's what everyone would stereotype it as. But there's so much more, and it's so varied. Like being autistic, there's not just one ADHD. It's like the rainbow sausage of ADHD. You can't pick and
Do what? Do sausage?
Ben, feel free to try and explain the rainbow sausage.
Is that what you said? A rainbow sausage? Wow. Is
Yeah.
that like a unicorn's rude bits?
No, I trust you to go with it in like a rude direction. Ben, shall I try and explain?
Yeah.
I just like trying to see the potato smile.
I was just going off on a tangent as well when Ben was explaining about getting sucked into gaming, because what was the game you had recently? And we just lost you for like a few days because you were just staying awake playing that game. Was it Spider-Man?
I got a PS5 and then I got Spider-Man, and I was just on it like for 3 days in a row. And even when I was on Zoom with you, I was not paying attention. I was just on PS5.
It was just on the game, yeah. And then
Are you on Spider-Man right now? Be honest.
No, I finished it already.
I can always tell when potatoes are lying.
And this is why I was laughing in my head as well, because then I know what Ben looks like, but I'm also just thinking, how does a potato, like, he's got no opposable thumbs to play with a joystick? I know, it's like, oh no, I've just completely lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Potato thumbs.
No. Oh, sausage.
Joystick?
Right,
Unicorn
rainbow sausage. No, rainbow sausage. But Sam, you will have seen me talking about the rainbow sausage. It's where I get frustrated with the way the spectrum is represented as a continuum.
Yes, you have. I do now remember the rainbow. I couldn't quite pick up when Ben said there was something about a sausage, and then I couldn't say if he said. I honestly, at one point, I thought he said Rambo sausage. So I don't know. I was thinking I've not seen all of First Blood, but I don't think that's in it.
So I think Ben's point was, because I talk about the rainbow sausage for an individual as opposed to using that continuum for all autistic people, because then you can talk about a person's spiky profile at certain points in their life. So I think Ben's point was ADHDers are clearly going to have their own rainbow sausage.
And my,
I go for stick of rock because it's a bit. Yeah, I use the stick of rock one. Remember, sausage is frightening. Yeah, sometimes.
It's because the word sausage is one of my favourite words to say, and it's it's stimmy.
I think it would be very me if I just went for unicorn's cock then, because they're probably the same.
Sure. I'm definitely going to put trigger warning. Well, content warnings, parents, strong language, content warning, strong language in this session.
Trigger warning for anyone that likes horses and believes in unicorns.
Anyway. I don't know what we were talking about. So Ben was explaining some of the key things that you might experience.
I was just going to point. You also said about the rainbow sausage. I think when you explained it to me, it would change throughout life as well, and I could totally relate to that as an ADHD. Is actually I'm struggling tonight because you're asking me questions about it, and like Ben said, it's like these definable things that it's different for everybody. And I was way different when I was this age and that age and this age, so it's kind of hard to sort of put where you are at your rainbow sausage or your stick of rock or your other thing. We don't want any more content warnings.
Oh yeah, my content warning is still there. And so stop taking my pinned comments down. No, I will not. We need to be more PG. Where are we? Oh, I keep getting lost with where we are now. Right. It's like a barrel of monkeys. And I'm having to think about the barrel of monkeys.
Want to organise a barrel of monkeys? Are you saying?
No. But it's the same thing that I say every week, which is that it's about learning your profile. And then that's the things that will help you. So like Sam, you've already started, working out your profile because you're saying, oh, I know that this works for me now, and I do this. I need this support. And that's the key thing that we want for all human beings, and particularly neurodivergent people. So because we had that list of what seems like it's all just doom and gloom to experience ADHD, unless you're Sam with your self-proclaimed giant ego.
You've got to build that ego, everybody. If you've got ADHD, it's your superpower. Everyone else is wrong. Tell them to piss off. You'll find something you're awesome at. Do you know the ADHD brain is not dysfunctioning? It's not working less. It just doesn't bother to turn on unless we're interested. And when it does, it goes, and it's just better at everything if you're interested. The trouble is you can't pick what you're interested in. That's the bit I've not quite figured out, is how you make yourself interested in frigging admin. Some people are weirdos.
Well, that's when you want the autistic, like the ready sorted autistics. So like Jessica, although I think Jessica is also or does experience ADHD as well, so that might not work. But Jessica, I would say the most dominant thing about their type of cake is their autistic experience, and they love a bit of admin and Excel spreadsheets and whatnot.
Ready salted cake? I thought we were doing crisps. That's disgusting.
Just types of like pastry, something where you can mix ingredients. What ingredients makes you is my point, I guess. Oh look, we've got an ADHD is cool, all the ideas, all the empathy, and none of the admin skills.
Yeah.
Nice. So I wanted to flag that again.
Strengths as well.
That's what I wanted to flag. So because we had that sort of list from Sai and some of the things that people might really struggle with in an environment that's not suited for them. But Andrew is asking, so does Sam have any strengths with your ADHD that you are willing to share? And they'd appreciate that as they are working with some students.
I mean, it's difficult again, isn't it? Because if I try and quantify that as myself, am I saying these are ADHD strengths or are they my strengths? Who knows? But what I would say is obviously because I've worked with quite a lot of children and young people that with ADHD, with impulsivity coming out of their ear holes, if that's a diagnostic term now, over the years, I would guess I could correlate it between all of us. I think there's that intensity, that passion when things are switched on, when someone is interested. So I guess, I mean, it is similar to, it's interesting because you sort of differentiate, but actually it is similar, I think, in some ways to supporting an autistic child, or maybe autistic child with PDA profile, that interest has to form the basis of everything. That's why I think that the whole education system needs a do-over, really, because I actually think if we made it more interest focused, we'd be helping loads of different kids, not just neurodivergent kids. I think neurotypical kids would benefit as well, because some of them are bored shitless anyway. Sorry, content. But, so for me, I think it's the strength of the brain or the ADHD when that interest is tweaked, is there. Having said that, that is that's more difficult if your interest is in something like, say, maybe gaming, where maybe there's not a definite outcome, although some people make loads of money off gaming. So, who am I to say? I certainly didn't. But then when I last played gaming, it was FIFA 2006. So it wasn't really a market in it.
Mega Drive.
Yeah, exactly. PS1, I think, Tigger. I'm not quite as old as you, chap. I did have a Mega Drive.
I had a Mega Drive.
Well, I had a Mega Drive, but I said the last time I played a computer game. So, not that old. What was I talking about? Strengths. I think what you're better off doing is you plant the idea in the center, and the ideas that come off that are usually where the gold dust is. I don't know if that makes sense, but you're like, I don't know. Say if you needed to, I'm trying to give clarity. Okay, so a good example would be in my sessions with parents. I will very often go into a session thinking, okay, I think this family, from what I remember and what we've spoken about before, they need some help with this. And I'll have that in my head. But the minute they bring something up that I think we can go with, I've pinged off and had another 10 ideas. And they're always the ideas that the families go, I really needed that, or I needed to hear that, or thank you, or you get some sort of feedback that's helpful. Same with training. I spend hours at the gym trying to meticulously go through my slides and all my notes. And the best bit is always something I've either made up on the spot or wasn't there in the first place, or I took out, or do you know what I mean? It's that kind of fluidity. So it's not just about strengths as in, they'll be really good at maths or whatever, which it won't. Well, I certainly wasn't. But it's more knowing how to position yourself in an activity, in a setting, in an environment that will make best use of your strengths. But I mean, the usual thing, again, spontaneity. If you look at it one way, I've started and given up 100 things. But the way I look at it is I've done 100 things that I never would have done. I've done all these things that I got halfway in and thought, well, that's boring, or I don't like that anymore. But I did it, I've done some ridiculous thing. I've walked the Jurassic Coast barefoot. I slept in a wood for 7 days to see if I could do it, and just didn't. Nearly died. Did not survive. So I guess it's sometimes it's not just the strength. It's like reframing it. It's kind of where would that profile, where would that person, where would that creativity, where would that fit best? What kind of job roles would it be better in? And I think one thing with ADHD, I personally feel like if we did literally put everyone into a scanner that could just go beep, beep, like your friend that sees the colours, if we could do that, we'd find loads of people with ADHD. And they're probably the people, Alan Sugars, the entrepreneurs, they've done something, they've got lucky. They're not lucky because obviously they've worked really hard, but something has happened that we can't quite quantify that's parked them in this position where all the bits of their brain that are awesome work and fit. So that is just not an answer at all. But
it was
a big
and
one.
I think actually we've had an anonymous comment directly to our Facebook that says, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is anonymous, but they're watching the ADHD live, and that Sam very, very much reminds them of their brother, who they believe is ADHD, and they're finding this very helpful to understand how their brother's brain may work and relate to them more. So they're just thanking us for the session. So Don't worry
Better
about
ask my mum
that.
and
This
dad
is
some hard-hitting questions, because do I have a brother that I don't know about?
and Victoria's
Handsome
point
chap,
here
I'd
as well.
imagine. Sorry.
Potentially. And then we've got Victoria's point here as well. So going back to this whole thing, like keeping on with this idea of ADHD strengths. So Victoria's saying racing and random thoughts, which can make life interesting and good for creative thinking, but emotional regulation can be troublesome. So memory is an issue, but can be protective in some senses. So I think that's actually a very protective thing for Louis, for instance. He forgets that he's just had an argument or a disagreement with somebody within about 2 minutes, and that's very protective. Whereas I remember things from years and years ago. I remember things from when I was 4, with such vivid, and this is why I say everything has challenges and strengths. So there's challenges and strengths to having such a vivid memory that I have, and very visual memory. And there's also challenges and strengths to not having that sort of memory, right? Because it's protective as well to be able to let go of things or forget things. Forgetting is actually a very important thing. And it's actually quite hard for a lot of people to do. So to some extent, that can be quite protective if you've got that ADHD brain.
Can I just touch on emotional regulation? Because that is that's a big one, isn't it? And I think I can certainly speak to that. I've had periods of my life where if you'd have asked me that question before, no, not good. My ADHD is really bad if that's what emotional regulation is down to. Impulsivity combined with poor emotional regulation can be quite a fiery combination. And there were certainly long periods of my life where that was played out and would have led to some quite bad places if it had carried on. The thing that helped me, and I feel I sometimes don't talk about it that much because, again, it's one of those things that's been popularized, made quite crass, made quite sort of, it's just as easy as this. And it really isn't. And there are people that have experienced things that I could never, ever connect with. So I don't know if it would work for me if I was them. But understanding that a lot of these words we use, a lot of the way that we define our emotions come from a different part of our brain and are very individual and are arguably, because the brain is so plastic, although it's going to take work, although it's not as easy for everyone, they're up for grabs. I genuinely, if you look at anxiety as a physiological process, it ain't much different from excitement. The difference is in the part of the brain that names it, and then sort of the more cognitive assessment of it. So I don't want anyone to think I'm going, it's not anxiety, it's excitement. Just call it that. You'll be fine. Because that's if you're staring down the barrel of a gun, that's slightly harder to do than me public speaking, which is when I think about it. But having that thought process, to me, does make a difference. There's a really good book called How Emotions Are Made, Lisa Marie Feldman, and she talks about the sort of neurological studies they did around emotions. And admittedly, they probably would be on neurotypical people in the main. And admittedly, some of the neurological studies they're not always concrete, are they, in terms of what they show? But what she said was that they looked at eliciting different emotions in different people, and then looked at the brain activity. And whilst there's always similar activity in that fight or flight system, in that amygdala, that limbic system, the part of the brain that is at the top was often firing very differently. So say if all 4 of us got into one of these fMRIs and they tried to elicit a feeling of sadness and they looked at all our brains, they'd all be doing different things, slightly different. There'd be commonalities in the sort of activity level here, but the top end would be really dependent on our experience, our life. And the bit of your brain that makes up words is in that top bit. So to me, it kind of made sense that actually I've got to talk about it. If I want, it's not just, talk yourself calm. There's a neurology behind it. And yes, it will take work and I won't get there. And there are times when my emotional regulation goes up too high, but it is that cognitive thinking about it that helps me in the moment. And I say when I do my de-escalation training for parents and, when you're trying to support someone that's really distressed, the last thing you need to throw in is your own levels of distress. So you've got to have something to work on. Your bottom brain's going bang, 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 bang as well. So if you start thinking about something, if you have a mantra, if you start the breathing exercise, if you consciously check in around you, to me, it's not even like the tool is not that important. It's the fact you're doing it. And I would encourage people that do struggle with it to look into some of that, not because I think it's an easy fix and it's definitely going to solve your problems, but the fact that you're working on it, you know, it's like with your back and the exercise thing, Chloe, that will need work to get to a place. Now,
I know, she told me I have to walk, which is horrible. I don't want to walk. I know, but that means leaving the house.
You have to run a marathon.
I know, it does leaving the house, and that's much harder these days. I have been thinking about, can I buy one of those really slim running machines?
But as an analogy, I mean that, you know, it's not going to be easy for you as someone who doesn't exercise to do it. For me, it'd be like, oh, okay, I'll do that because I like that. So that's what I'm saying. It's like the activity still helps. It's just harder for different people to do it or get there sometimes. And I guess that's what
I think obviously the caveat being that so many of us also experience alexithymia, which makes naming and knowing and recognizing how we even feel on our inside of our bodies that much harder. And so for some of those people, it might be a different process of really just trying to connect with your body, which can be quite difficult. Like, what does my body actually feel like, as opposed to trying to name like these abstract things called emotions, because they're very strange.
But that's I don't know enough about alexithymia, but my question there would be, what even tells you when you experience that, do you know something's going on? Can you feel something?
It really depends on, because again, with everything, alexithymia has its own sort of spectrum. So I have supported some people who don't even know they're smiling, so they're really disconnected from their bodies. And some people, their alexithymia, I mean, I experience alexithymia to some extent. We will in a second, Sai. Sorry, Sai's like, answer the damn mouse question. We will. I thought that'd be a good one instead of the.
Because then it's again obvious. Then they wouldn't eat all your mice. There'd be shitloads of mice everywhere. So.
Oh no! Now I've got distracted as well.
Sorry. So alexithymia, and you were saying.
Oh yeah. So I do experience some level of alexithymia in the sense of, I know exactly that I'm feeling something. I might even recognize I'm crying and I'm distressed in some capacity. And it just takes me a few days to process all of that, to process all those thoughts, the feelings that went along with it. So there's definitely different ways of experiencing alexithymia. But I think all of them do have, you know, all of these things do have methods that could be supported. So like I say, with somebody with, and there's no judgment on these things because it's just a way of experiencing the world differently. But for those who I know or I've met who really are so disconnected from the bodily responses, because a lot of emotions are body responses, like you might get heart racing or that so-called butterflies in the stomach, you know, all those kinds of things. So for those that are very disconnected from that, it is focusing on the more tangible. So I've suggested in the past things like wearing a Fitbit watch to recognize when your heart rate changes and why might that be, and start to really try to connect them with their body. So it can be really difficult and different for different people.
But again, sorry that's a great tool, but it's still the same process of kind of making your emotions cognitive, isn't it? But it's just doing it with support, like you say. If you can't do that because of your own sensation isn't there, that heart rate monitor is a great way of going, something's going on. What's going on? You know, and you start to then cognitively think about it rather than just be in it and caught up in it, you know?
And having that more logical way of trying to approach it potentially. Victoria, when you flagged this, I thought it was a really good point, and I can't remember why you're saying it now. Can you remind me?
Did she flag it when we were talking about the unicorn?
No, not that far ago, not that long ago.
You weren't thinking in those pictures. Okay, fine.
No, Victoria, can you remind me why you popped that? Victoria's memory is also not that great, so it's like might not be that easy to remember either. But there was a reason that Victoria made this point, and I'm quite interested in this because it feels to me like a number of ADHDs, not always, don't necessarily think in pictures that much. So I know that So do you not, Sam?
No, all words. My entire brain is made up of words. I can't even. I have to make myself think in a picture. It's constant diatribe, which again probably makes sense.
So you have some level of aphantasia, which also Victoria does, which then, and so does Louis. And I think that also impacts memory. Aphantasia, yeah. So I'll spell it for people. Hold on.
But what is it? Is it not being able to think in pictures?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I didn't realize that most people. I didn't think that everyone could.
This is my thing. Have you must have heard me. Well, you would forget. That's fine. But I've spoken about this a lot because I find it fascinating. So I always say this, that different advocates have things that they're interested in a particular area. So like Kieran Rose, it's masking, and Priscilla Isles, it's neurodivergent people getting sucked into cults. Like we have very particular interests. And mine is I always want to know if the person thinks in pictures or not. Because it impacts. I've definitely talked about this with you. I love that it's the ADHD thing as well that you've potentially forgotten.
No, but it's not. This is the thing with memory, and it's not forgetting. But when you then said the second thing, it went. Oh yeah, it was in there. It's just like you had to rattle it a bit to get it to fall out the right hole.
I love it as well because Victoria doesn't remember either, like why they mentioned it. I'll play this back tomorrow and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what Victoria was referring to, and that was a really good point. And now I can't remember what it was.
Pictures.
But yeah, memory will be different. And I think to some extent, like object permanence, it might have been the object permanence part. So I think object permanence is going to be very, very hard for somebody if they can't think in pictures and see the thing. So Louis always used to find it really weird that he would ask, where's such and such? This was years ago, and I can still see it now as well. This is the thing, my visual is so prominent, and it was, where's my charger? And he boxed up all his stuff because he was moving house before we were living together, and I said, it's in that third box, the really big one on top, and I wasn't there, I was on the phone, on top of the blah blah, next to such and such, behind none of that. He's like, he found it. It's like, how did you do that? And I was like, because I can see it. And that's the big difference where he doesn't have that object permanence. So Ben, you do think in pictures, don't you? So I wonder if there's a connection with rejection sensitivity as well. I feel like lots of these things, like I say, when you work out these things to work out what kind of pastry you are.
I'll say it's quite fast though. The thing when I tried to think in pictures, it's rapid. It's not there for a long time, and like especially when I'm imagining something going on around me, it will switch within a few seconds to something else. And then when I want to remember what I was thinking, I have to retrace my thoughts and my pictures, and it's all muddled. But I can think in pictures.
That sounds. I mean, you do play a lot of video games, though, Ben. So. Maybe. That might be. It sounds like a video game in your head. Like,
Tigger, do you think in pictures? Did we ever work this out with you?
The image I had years ago was that I sign. Well, I used to sign a lot. I did BSL, British Sign Language, years ago, and loved it and adored it. All those years ago, before you were all born, and I did British Sign Language, and I was starting to do. Level 2, stage 2 in BSL, which basically means you've got to kind of immerse yourself within the deaf community. I started thinking in hand shapes, and I will never forget that. So I started seeing hand shapes instead of a visual image or instead of a word. And that to me goes back to I can't say it correctly, neural plasticity of the brain to a certain extent. Yeah. And the fact that it changed the images that I see. I feel like it's a video game sometimes on fast speed. Does that? So sometimes I think it's like, and there's just so much coming in at once sometimes that I have to slow it down to focus it from an image viewpoint. So that's kind of how mine does sometimes.
So now I'm ADHD, I can dish these out, can't I? So I reckon Chloe, absolute ready salted. But Ben and Tigger, I reckon they might have a little Ben quite a lot splash of vinegar in there. If that's what ADHD is, the vinegary bit.
Bit of vinegar, yep.
Vinegar.
And somebody else is just mentioning, so the opposite is hyperphantasia, which is more common than aphantasia. And I'm a hyperfan, and that my memory is so good. But like we say, sometimes that's not always a good thing. So Victoria's saying here, so Victoria doesn't think in pictures, but memory as a protective factor. So if you don't think in pictures, less likely to remember or embed the memory. And I think there's a number of things there. So if you're an ADHDer and it doesn't grab your interest, it's then not getting encoded anyway, even if you don't think in pictures. So I imagine there will be some nice, strong memories for certain things, but that will be because it grabbed your interest. And then your brain is encoding that and creating that as a memory, because memory paths in our brains can become quite like physical. They are physical things that exist in our brains. It's not like you could grab one and go, this is a certain memory. It doesn't quite work like that, but
that's interesting as well, because with me, it's always a story. It's always a narrative. And it's a lot easier, I think. Well, I don't know because I've not really thought in pictures, but I would imagine it's a lot easier to retell a narrative in a slightly fairer way, kinder way, less traumatic way to yourself than maybe it is with if you think in visually. I don't know. Because I know Tony Robbins, which take everything he says with a pinch of salt, but he talks about reframing visual. So if you have a difficult visual memory, you kind of reframe the visuals and you think about it happening in a different way and all that kind of stuff. And I do that all the time. Like if there's something embarrassing that could be really difficult for me, I grab it and it's now my story and now it's funny. So it's at my, do you know what I mean? But if I've owned it. We were at first, I'll give you an example just because it's funny. We were at a first aid course the other day. And the first aider was saying how the trainer was saying how if you've got your Nurofen or ibuprofen or something like that in, it's always a personal first aid kit. And if not, then it might be a work first aid kit. So if you're going to put your stuff in it, you can only put it in your personal one. If not, it's a work one. And I got my work one out, which I've been using for the last couple of weeks up at the woods. And I chucked it on the desk. I was like, well, can you show me what's supposed to be in it? Because this is one I've been given for work. Is it got the right stuff? And he's opened it and he's looked in it, raised his eyebrows and gone, no, that's a personal one. And I went, no, I think I put some ibuprofen in it, but it's definitely a work one. I just put some ibuprofen in it for the other day. I had a headache. And he's gone, no, Sam, it's a personal one. And I've gone, no, give it here. And it just undone it and like spilled out onto the desk and everyone's seen it. And I've had to go, oh no, I left my pile cream in it. And it genuinely was pile cream, but I had to sort of grab it and be. So now I'm retelling it. You know what I mean? It's funnier. It's not. Oh my god, how embarrassing anymore. I don't know where I was going.
And I've made that whole thing. Like I'm seeing a first aid kit. I'm seeing a box of pile cream. Like I'm seeing all the things as you're telling that story.
All the things, Chloe. Are you seeing why I need the pile cream? I hope not.
Now I am. So thanks for that.
I said stop there.
This is my issue with thinking in pictures. And Victoria does say that, where Victoria was saying about the somewhat protective properties of not encoding memories and keeping memories in that way, it can also have an opposite impact because you can't remember the good times if you're stuck in a downward spiral. You can't remember the good things or get out of it or counteract it. So that's quite important and quite interesting. So it might be much more tangible things. Okay, hold on, Anushka. Too many straining weights. This is in relation to the piles.
Yeah, high protein diet, that sort of stuff. It does tend to.
I don't need those thoughts. I don't need those images.
A couple of days.
Oh no, Inga! Now I'm thinking about rainbow sausages.
Now one of those going up there would definitely need some cream.
Anyway, we've been going for over 2 hours, which is not that uncommon for us, but I can feel we would keep going. I'm going to hand it over to Ben for the final question, our nice question that we end on.
All right. What's your favourite stim?
Oh, stim. Okay, so I've I've just started doing some tearing of folding of paper. That happens quite a lot. We've got about half a pack of chewing gum. I get through at least one of them a day. So I think my stimmy is me just trying not to talk sometimes. So I chew. Blue tack. I'm a big fan of blue tack. Me and Tigger share that. We do often chat about the fans. Tigger, look what they've left on this desk. It's an enormous pot. I don't know if you can see that.
No, it's blanked out because of your screen.
You'll have to put it in front of your own head, maybe. There you go.
That's great.
That
What
works.
is it?
It's like a
Slime?
pot of slime, but it's
What's it smell like?
Bit rank, to be honest.
Oh,
But then I have had my
Not
hemorrhoid
like
fingers in it, so there you go.
Oh god. So not like a pot of Play-Doh, which smells beautiful.
No, it doesn't smell nice like Play-Doh. But yeah, that kind of fidgety stuff. What other stims? It stims like everything, isn't it, though? Because and this is where I don't think I have got any ready salted, and I think everyone sort of agreed with that at the start. If we're now making ready salted autistic somehow, I don't know. And the ADHD is the vinegar, but I listen to particular audiobooks and have read and watched certain films. Just they're like comfort blankets. And my most recent one over the last sort of 5 years or so, however long it's been out, has been the Hilary Mantel Wolf Hall series on audiobook. It's all about Thomas Cromwell. It gets bizarre. Like, I'm not even that interested in the Tudors. There's just something about it that if I'm doing anything, I can just put it on in the background and wherever it is, and it's just nice. It just chills me out. So there you go. I was going to say talking. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, so Anushka says, I was going to say
Fair
talking as a verbal stim, and then I asked, do you enjoy making noises? But you've just said, so actually audio.
Hey, I have. We used to at school. That was my thing, just making weird noises all the time. There you go.
Fab. Okay. And then Sai wants to know who would win in a race to build a trebuchet: 420 chickens with human brains or 69 humans with chicken brains. So who would win in creating a trebuchet?
I think unless you've got an. No, yeah, I reckon. We'd figure it out with our little chicken wings and feet, especially 420 of them. Chickens, like, I'm not being funny. I know. I'm all. I'm a meat eater. There's probably a lot of vegans watching that think all animals are equal, but they're not. Chickens are really stupid. They are the most. I mean, they don't. I remember watching this. Oh, I'm going to get panned for this, but I remember watching Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall go on about like chickens need free range. They need space to roam and get their brains going and stuff. And it just panned across the screen to this chicken on a hay bale that they put in to give it sort of sensory, texture in its environment. Just looked so stupid. It didn't have a clue where it was. It didn't mind. Yeah. Sorry.
And Victoria says chickens would fall over with human brains. Like, chickens' heads are very small.
Oh no, but I don't think, did Simon mean like proportionately? Oh, okay. I hadn't see that.
He didn't specify. He just said 420 chickens with human brains. And this is the thing. So I'm assuming, Sam, you're not seeing all these scenarios, right? So I've now seen different scenarios of this, which is 420 chickens. But when you said about them, like, we'll be fine with our chicken wings. So I'm literally imagining them like trying to build a trebuchet, which are like these little wings. But now I'm now thinking 420 chickens with human brains, as in they're just holding human brains, like zombies.
Well, this is just turning, quite frankly, terrifying, isn't it? That's a hell of a horror film.
And Victoria says he didn't mention proportions, so yeah.
No, and if he didn't, and you're quite right. If them 420 chickens have got massive human brains in a tiny chicken head, then that doesn't even work, does it? You can't fit.
And I think it was recently I showed Victoria. I think it was Victoria, or was it Si? I can't remember. But the thing about chickens having what do you call it? Where their heads don't move. What's that called? Gyro heads, like of a chicken. Yeah, exactly, Ben. Look at Ben.
Gyro head. Oh, you mean the eyes don't move?
Yes, like the heads doesn't move. Like if you move their body, their head just stays in the same position. Gyroscopic, that's the one. And then, okay, so size idea, 420 chickens with human brains. Karen says just with could mean next to even. So it's,
but
it's
also,
oh,
I mean,
it was you and Caitlin. Yeah.
We could get quite philosophical about it. You know, if 420 humans find themselves in a chicken's body, but the last thing on, why are they building a flipping trebuchet? Like what I mean, I'd wanted to like learn how to hold a pen so I could write a message to someone saying, by the way, it's Sam, I'm in a chicken, can you not eat me? Like what? I don't want to, what am I building a trebuchet for? Whereas
do you know what the thing
stupid, so humans with chicken brains, they probably end up building something ridiculous.
I wonder how many conversations like this that non-autistic people or just neurotypical people have, because there's us literally picking this apart. Like, what exactly are we? What is the scenario? Like, Ben, can you see different scenarios of like 420 chickens? That's a lot of chickens in my head as well. With human brains.
He normally asks me how many I can fight as well, which.
Anyway, thank you.
That's where the coming from.
Potentially for the fighting. So thank you everybody so much for being here with our very random meandering discussion on the ADHD discovery journey. Next week we have Katie Monday and David Gray Hammond, and they're going to be discussing autistic people and mental health. And I think to some extent because David's been doing some sort of blogs with guest Aucademy people and other people around the mental health of autistic people. So yeah, see everyone next week. Feel free to stay on for a second, Sam, and then we can chat afterwards and see how you feel about your first session with us on Aucademy. But yeah, bye everybody, and that's when Chloe has to find the outro. Where's the outro? Just watch Ben being like a really dancey, sexy potato.